12-24, a resolution to increase receipts appropriate from unencumbered balance and amend the certificate of appropriation with the county auditor in the law enforcement block JAG grant police fund 2027 and approve a then and now certificate. That's coming from the safety committee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is indeed coming from the Safety Committee. Councilmember Teener is going to be my second on that one. This will be for 3 reads. And Chief Snyder, if you want to come up and share with us what this legislation is about.
Good evening, members of council. This is actually good news. This is our JAG grant that came in from 22-23. The reason that it's here for a then and now is before I get too wordy, the federal government can be a little delayed with delivering funds, and they just got delivered, I believe, Trish, 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago, into our grant account, and we need to have this approved so we can ship it out to Fairfield County for their share, and we keep about $7,000 from each account. Just as a bit of context, we spend that on body camera program, and we also spend that on our intoxilizer or breathalyzer machine.
All right. Thank you, Chief. That's
Okay, we'll have 3 readings. Any other questions, comments?
Was that?
Do we need
I
3
apologize.
readings?
I thought it was 1, but I'm not positive.
Oh, we can make it 1 read then. My apologies, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we can make that 1 read.
Okay, that's okay.
Yeah, no, we can make that 1.
Thank you.
Any opposition to 1 reading? So be it. Next item is Resolution 113-24, a resolution to approve the issuance of a then and now certificate for payment of invoice to American Structure Point out of the LDOT Improvement Fund, and that's coming from Public Works Committee.
And so we have somebody here tonight to speak to that.
Hello. This was, the money has been appropriated, the PO's been cut, but they actually started to work prior to the PO being cut. So we need a then now resolution so we can pay the incoming invoices.
Just pay the bills.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
I have a question.
Yes.
I know we talked about this earlier this year, but I'm not recalling exactly what it is they're designing. Are they just designing crosswalks across
This project
Memorial?
is the Memorial Pierce walkways and crosswalks, and it's going to provide crosswalks. As of right now, we're under design. It's not finalized, but the hope is we'll have crosswalks on both sides of Memorial Drive. I mean sidewalks. I'm sorry, sidewalks on both sides of Memorial Drive, from Arlington to Whittier, and then we'll have a sidewalk that goes from Memorial Drive down Pierce to Moo-Moo's, the crosswalk that goes over to Kroger's, and then we're looking at 2 to 3 crosswalks. We're hoping one about where the Kroger entrance is, one right there around where Firestone is, and then one at Whittier. And those will be, so 3 crosswalks and sidewalks.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Mr. Leuchtenberg will be my second.
Pardon me?
Mr. Leuchtenberg will be my second.
Thank you. Temporary Resolution 114-24, a resolution to authorize the Surface Safety Director to enter into an engineering agreement for various construction administration services for the solid handling replacement project, and that's coming from water pollution control.
All right. Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is down at Lawrence Street, and I believe will be funded by Ohio EPA loan, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. So this is really an early piece. We don't expect to enter into this contract until probably January or February. We won't be receiving the loan from Ohio EPA until March. So I was doing legislation, decided to get it off my desk.
All right. I like being proactive. So given that timeline, we can do 3 readings, and Ms. Teener will be my second.
Very good. Any questions?
Yeah, I've got a few. This is down on Lawrence. Was Arcadis the original designer? of the building, and they're going to do CA now?
Yes, Arcadis we have a design contract with Arcadis, and they will be doing the construction administration, resident, project representative, and any programming and as-built and all of those cleanup things on that.
What is the estimated cost of the facility? Do you know?
The facility, the current estimate is just a tad under $10 million,
And
which is a
they
long
did-
way from the pole building that we originally built that one.
Right. Do you have a feel for what their fee was for design alone?
Not off the top of my head, I'd have to go back and look at the legislation.
Okay. Okay, that's all I had. Thanks.
Thank you. Other questions? And rereadings and Becky? Very good. Thank you. Temporary Resolution 115-24, a resolution to authorize the Surface Safety Director to advertise for bids for the solid handling facility replacement project, also coming from water pollution control.
Yeah, so this is just authorizing the SSD to go out for bid for this project.
That's correct. So for our loan, we're required to advertise at the end of December and open bids by the end of January.
And
Yep, given that timeline, we can do 3 readings.
Three readings.
And Mr. Ailes will be my second.
perfect. Any other questions, comments? Thank you. One more item is Resolution 116-24, a resolution to appropriate funds in the Water Reserve Fund 6027 and authorize payment of bills for the Ohio Water Development Loan for the South Water Plant Booster Pump Project, also coming from water pollution control.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have some invoices we have to pay for this project by the end of the year, and I believe EPA is going to reimburse us, if I'm correct on that.
That's correct. This money will be coming from the Ohio EPA loan that we're receiving on Thursday. This is really a paperwork thing. As soon as we receive the loan, OWDA charges us a fee, and we have to be able to book that to make the auditor happy by the end of November. And then we'll be signing the contract with Arcadis, and they will have some invoices for us. But mainly, I can't sign the engineer's contract without an appropriation. So this will allow Tricia to issue the auditor certificate.
And yeah, she mentioned we have an invoice coming early November, so we'll be requesting suspension and having 2 readings on that.
Okay, thank you. Any other,
And Ms. Teener will be my second.
thank you. Other
Thank you.
questions? Thank you, Denise. We're looking at 117-24, a resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract with Fairfield Healthcare Professionals, Inc., to provide professional health care and wellness services to City of Lancaster employees and their dependents, and to declare an emergency. And this is coming from Administrative Committee. Councilman Leuchtenberg.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councilman Bizchak will be my second on this, and I'd like to ask the City Safety Director to address this, please.
Sure. Thank you, Councilman Leuchtenberg. I think that most of you are aware that Mayor and I have been talking about this now for several months. The county has entered into a similar contract. They started this in 2017, where they entered into a contract with Fairfield Health Professionals, basically FMC, to allow their employees to go to the urgent care for free during specific hours, Monday through Friday. And what's nice is it's a set amount for the city, as it is for the county. It does not get billed to our health insurance. So the idea is that hopefully it saves us on our health insurance costs and health insurance premiums in the future. Since 2017, the county has been able to save $1.7 million in health insurance costs, which helps to keep their premiums down for their employees. Granted, they have a lot more employees than the city has. However, we would expect to see some savings over the 3 to 5 years, significant savings. So we are asking to enter into this contract with Fairfield Health Professionals And that way we can make this available to our employees and their families effective January 1st. The county, I don't know all their parameters, but we are hoping to make it available to all city employees, full-time and part-time status. You do not have to be on our health insurance to utilize this benefit. We are not capped at the number of visits. We're only restricted in the hours that we're available to visit. Basically, our contract is paying for a medical professional to see city employees and their families. So we want to take advantage as much as we can to allow our employees, whether they are on our insurance, part-time or full-time, to be able to utilize this benefit. Any questions?
They don't have to go there, they can go there.
They don't have to go there.
Okay.
They can go there. It's completely free for them to go there. There's no copay, there's no deductible, and it does not get billed to our health insurance.
You had
One
a
other
question,
questions. I noted on Resolution 118, a similar resolution that I'd like you to speak to as well, where that one is a not-to-exceed amount billed on probably an hourly basis or a per-visit basis, but this one is not. Or was it meant to be on a not-to-exceed basis?
It is a set amount. If you look, it's a set amount for 2025, a set amount for 2026. So it's not, it's actual set amount. It won't go lower, it won't go higher. That's the actual contracted agreement. So it'll be that set dollar amount for each year for this contract.
How does that compare to 2025? How does that compare to, say, 2023, our costs? It's far lower than our healthcare costs?
So we currently do not have a contract like this. This is brand new for us. I can tell you that we spend a lot of money in health insurance premiums being self-insured. There's really no way for us to tell you exactly what we're spending right now in urgent care visits. I don't have the ability to break that down for you.
Councilman Teener.
So you say that it's a capped amount, did you say?
It is a set contractual amount.
Okay, so let me just, and so they can go for anything, right?
So they do have a list of things that you can be seen for, and I can get that out to you. We've been sharing that with some of the employees, but there's a list of what you can be seen for. It's mostly acute.
Because I've been in healthcare since I've been 19, and you get these hypochondriacs, you get these people, they gotta take their kids in for every whip stitch. And if it's a capped amount and if people are abusing it, what happens?
So it's meant for acute care. So if you have a sinus infection, ear infection, maybe you pulled a muscle, it's meant for acute care. There's no capped amount right now of how many visits you can have per year, but the idea would be if you do have ongoing medical concerns, then they are going to help you find a primary care physician if you don't have one to try and transition you over to long-term care for someone else. If you receive shots, they will give you your shots. Like if you don't want to do a self-administered shot, they will give you your shots for free. But again, they don't want to continue to refill your medications. They're going to refer you to another physician for long-term care.
Well, it's free for them, but not but the city's paying, so they're getting paid.
Yep, we're paying this
Okay,
set
so
amount, and that set amount will not change.
Okay.
And
Well, I just know of being in the healthcare for over 40 years that there's people that, man, they got to take their kids for everything, and it could use up whatever, and other people won't get to, they abuse the privilege. That's what I'm worried about.
yeah. So this will be a first time for us, and the first year, if we see something like that happens where all of our employees can't be seen, we may have to maybe put a little more stringent parameters on it. But right now, we're just trying to remove barriers and allow full access for employees. They don't think that will be an issue, but we'll monitor it the first year and make adjustments as we need to.
Okay.
But they say their costs exceed $186,000 in the first year. They'll keep seeing folks beyond that. That's okay, good. Well,
That is correct.
And if it's been $1.7 million in savings for the county since 2017, sounds pretty good.
Yes. Again, they have 900 employees versus our 500 employees, but it's still a very significant savings, and we would hope and expect to see savings regardless.
Right. Thank you.
Treasurer Stoughton, were you waving to say hello, or?
No, I actually
you
want to
have
make a comment.
to make?
I have actually more of a question than a comment. First of all, we talked about this about a month ago. I would suggest, if you want to get in depth, Jeff Porter obviously lived this with the county, so he would be a really good resource to talk to. But my second question was, is city council eligible since they are elected city employees?
City council will be eligible because you do receive a city paycheck and are considered part-time employees of the city.
That was my real question. So.
Yes.
There you go. I knew it was all about money.
Again, we are
We
trying
like
to
it.
make it as open as possible right now. If we find that this becomes too stringent or that it becomes too overwhelming for the urgent care staff, what they've committed to, then we may have to revisit year 2 or year 3. But right now, again, we're just trying to remove barriers to help our employees stay healthy. So, good question. It will include city council.
Any other questions, comments, suggestions? And
I'm sorry, you're excluding treasurer, though?
Excluding the,
That's what Trish said.
I did not state that.
3 readings.
3 readings, thank you. Now we're going to go to temporary resolution 118-24, a resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract with Renaissance Counseling and Consultation to provide professional mental health counseling services to City of Lancaster employees, their dependents, and to declare an emergency, and to the treasurer. And that's coming from administration.
And you will be my second.
I'll be your second.
And I just want to clarify, the language on the resolution says that this is a not-to-exceed amount. So is that a fixed fee, or is it a not-to-exceed that we're working towards?
So in the quote that they gave us, it was a not to exceed. However, I would expect that it will probably be close to that because, again, what we are doing is paying for professional service. It's going to be individuals who are assigned to city employees to see our employees.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? We got 3 readings.
Yep.
And finally, we have Resolution 119-24, a resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to accept Northeast Public Energy Council 2024 Energy Community Grant Funds and to declare an emergency. When I say final, that's your final opportunity tonight, Councilman Luchtenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bischak will be my second. And if you would like to address this, City Safety Director?
Sure, thank
Be
you.
great.
So NOPEC offers these community energy grants. It is a formula-based grant that we are entitled to. All we have to do is just ask for the funds to be released. These funds expire at the end of November, which is why I've asked for 2 readings. To get our funds, we just have to submit invoices showing that we spent money on energy-efficient projects. So our projects that we just started today actually are updating energy-efficient lighting in the Chestnut Building, so the annex at 121 East Chestnut. We are going to be updating energy-efficient lighting on the first floor of City Hall and the 3rd floor of City Hall. And so we would like to ask NOPEC to disperse these funds to reimburse us for the money that we're spending to do this energy-efficient lighting upgrade.
Thank you.
Is 2 readings enough, or would you like to get that moving?
I was under the impression we're going to do 1 reading, which is fine with me, but
I will leave that to your discretion. We just have to have the funds requested for disbursement by the end of November. So we have another meeting on November 4th. I will leave that to your discretion.
I'll second 1 reading if you'd like to go that route.
any other problems with council? This will be, I think, replacing the existing fluorescent lights with LED lights, which are a huge savings in energy costs. Down the line, it'll save the city countless thousands of dollars. So
That's my goal. I'm certainly hoping so.
We have no objections from anybody to do 1 reading.
Okay.
So be it. Thank you. Temporary Resolution 120-24, a resolution to authorize the mayor to enter into a pre-annexation agreement with Metro Development Roman numeral 2 LLC on behalf of 6 owners, including Fairfield County Auditor parcel numbers 0148098910, 0140099511, 0140099520, 0140099530, 0140099540, 0140099500, and 0140099541, consisting of 22.08 plus or minus acres in Greenfield Township, and to declare an emergency, coming from the Economic Development Committee. Councilman Hoop.
Yes, so this one, there's three other ones, have to do with an annexation on Election House Road for an apartment building, and I think Stephanie Hall can give some clarification.
Sure. So Metro Development has been working with the city to provide multifamily housing for the past few years. You all may be familiar with their development on Hubbard Drive that they've started work on. And around the same time, they had started working on another project right off of Election House. And they decided to bring that into the city limits. They managed to find the 5% contiguity to do an expedited type 2 annexation. And when you do an expedited type 2 annexation, there are timelines imposed by the Ohio Revised Code. You may have all heard this before. I harp about it every single time, but we have 20 days after we get served with the petition for annexation. So we usually try to pass all of the appropriate legislation at the first meeting immediately thereafter to make sure that everything is done in accordance with the law and that we don't hold up the Board of County Commissioners in their process in figuring out whether or not they're going to go ahead and pass that annexation. The mayor may have some more information, but I see Jill Tangeman with Voorhees here tonight. She's a representative from the developer, so if anybody has any questions, feel free to throw those at any one of us.
Questions of council? Anybody?
I have a question. In Exhibit 2, the pre-annexation agreement, on the item 5, it refers to a development concept that's attached. I didn't see that development concept that illustrates the apartments that they're proposing.
And it's not included, I'm guessing, because it's not a legal document that goes with the annexation, so we were probably trying to limit the amount of documents that we sent out. All I provide in the packet are the legal exhibits that are required. But I'm sure we can get you a copy of that if you would like.
I do. I have a copy that I'm happy to show you if that's helpful.
Well, we're approving an annexation. It'd be nice to see what we're approving, I guess, as far as the concepts you're looking at.
Tonight, Steve, we're proving that we can serve that piece of property and that, we're starting the process, but the final approval will come later.
Oh, well, if that's the case.
But the
then we're
concept
good.
is good to know.
This is just a conceptual site plan that shows the multifamily buildings.
How many units?
250. I'm not sure off the top of my
Oh,
head.
okay.
I
Looks
think
like
it's
a lot.
250.
I'm sorry?
I think it's 250.
That sounds right.
50?
250.
250, that's excellent. We need them.
Yeah.
We need them. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this? I'm also going to reference, we have Resolution 121-24. It's also part of that. Do you want to comment on that before they're all kind of down
Sure.
the line?
Sure, I can. So as we indicated, the first one is for the pre-annexation agreement. The second one is for the resolution to authorize the provision of services. And then if you'd like, I'll go ahead and address temporary ordinance 4024
Please, I was
and
gonna
temporary
ask you to
ordinance
do that.
4124.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So as the mayor said, 12124 is to authorize the services that the city will provide, so the utilities that we are going to deliver and they will use and pay us for. And then 4024 to accept the petition for annexation, which we're required to do by law. And then ordinance 4124 is an ordinance to provide a buffer for an incompatible land use. So it just essentially is saying that if for some reason the zoning comes in and the zoning is we zone it, and the zoning is incompatible with the current zoning in the township, we will require some kind of buffer, but that's always required by our zoning code anyway, that there be a buffer generally between those types of uses. So that's what that is for, just in case.
And I understand we're requesting suspension on all legislation.
Yes, sir, because we have 20 days, like I said, to get that done.
You want to go through the seconds on each of them real quick, please?
For 12024, I think it's Mrs. Kreitz. And then for 12124, it's Michael Wing, Mr. Wing.
correct.
And then 4024 is Mrs. Kreitz, and 4124 is Mr. Wing.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh,
Any
one,
other
yes.
final questions on this group?
One other question. On Exhibit A for 121-24, the pre-annexation agreement, it references 22.353 acres. Everything else is talking about 22.080.
Yeah, some will be right-of-way that will come out of the actual annexation.
That's
It
what I
gets
figured.
removed.
Just want
Yep.
to clarify. Thank you.
Yep.
Good. Any final questions? Great. We'll move on. We have two additional pieces of legislation. I guess you've got them in your presence. You just didn't have them ahead of time to be a walk-in. So that would be temporary resolution 122-24, a resolution to increase receipts, appropriate from the unencumbered balance, and amend the certificate of other sources and appropriations with the county auditor and the income tax fund 2016. And that's coming from Finance Committee. And I'm going to request Income Tax Commissioner Hamilton to let us know what we're doing.
Yeah. This has kind of just been more of an annual thing that we've tried to do towards the end of the year. I see what my carryover cash is going to be like. Make sure I have enough to start off the first quarter of the next year. And then we try to do an additional income tax split. And that's exactly what this is. It's just allowing us to take the extra $5 million that's voted on to go to the sources that it's supposed to go to and allow them to have it now versus later.
Thank you. It's the good thing. It's from the income. Lots from the income tax increase the voters passed a couple years ago, and until we work through the budget, this gets into the accounts where it belongs and will be used appropriately going forward. Any questions? Additional questions? And that will be Councilman Ailes for the second, and we will have one reading. Thank you. The final piece of legislation this evening is temporary resolution 123-24, a resolution to increase receipts, appropriate from the unencumbered balance, and amend certificate of other sources and appropriations with the county auditor and the .15 fire levy fund, 246, the .45 police and fire levy fund, 2047, and the .45 police and fire levy fund, 2051. That's also coming from the Finance Committee. And I would call on Auditor Nettles to let us know what we're going to do.
All right, this, we're just kind of using a piggyback off of the income tax additional split. We are wishing to put the voter-approved tax monies in some appropriate accounts, so if the money needs to be used, it can be used now. So this is just kind of trying to get those monies appropriated, following along with the cash.
Correct. And I had one question. The Parks has money in there also.
But they're the Parks Board, so I can't speak on behalf of the Parks Board, so that kind of leaves at their discretion to do what they need to do with that monies at that point in time, so I can't override the Parks Board.
Right, that was my understanding. I just want to verify that that is the case, and in the event they have a project they want to get in this year,
They'll
have
be
to
coming
bring
to council.
legislation to council.
Right, separately.
Good, thank you. Any other questions, comments from anybody? Councilman Ehlers, would you be my second? And we're also suspending and having one reading on that. And that concludes the legislation. We'll move on to other discussion items, and we're looking at departmental updates. It's you.
Good evening again, members of council. Just have a few updates. When I give these, I don't like to go back months and months. I try to keep it within a week or two of things that the men and women have done over at LPD that I'm extremely proud of. The very first one is we're not Columbus Police Department. We don't have a helicopter or an air unit, which is very, very advantageous to have. However, I think you guys would probably give me a lot of grief if I asked for a helicopter, so that's a problem. But a couple years ago, Officer Malone and then Officer, now Sergeant Wells, started our drone program. And they just started with a general consumer level drone to try to get up in the air for missing persons, et cetera, et cetera. And it was really successful for, say, large scale events or when we had a missing person or trying to find somebody, but it wasn't really, it's just basically a camera in the sky. I think it's important to let the citizens of Lancaster know, and definitely council to know, when you're approving our budgets, through the last couple of years, they were able to build on that program. And Sergeant Welsh, especially just these last 6 months, built our drone team. So that's going to consist of around 8 officers. And what he most recently did was able to assign at least 2 or 3 officers per shift to go out with a drone. So if we had a missing child or we had a suspect that ran, we would have the same capability as, say, a helicopter in the sky to go find them. We attached some thermal imaging to these drones. It's pretty amazing technology, not a huge cost, believe it or not. And Sergeant Welsh is to definitely be thanked for that. Without him, I don't think it would have been as advanced a program as we have now. And I would like to hand something out as I just share a success story. Like I said, I like to keep it recent, just from this morning. So October 28th in the middle of the morning. So as you know, our directed patrol unit, they have canines in their directed patrol unit. And the Fairfield County Sheriff's Office asked for assistance on a motor vehicle crash where our canine went out to help track the suspects from that. They fled. But also Sergeant Welsh and the drone team went out and sent drones up in the air. And within a couple of minutes, they found the suspects in this car that had fled. The interesting thing, or the important thing about this, this was an ability we did not have prior to this drone team. The suspects were only hiding feet away from where the officers were searching without drones. They were in some heavy brush, and they were not seen. But if you look on that sheet there, you'll see how the thermal imaging works. And just a couple minutes after getting these drones up, they saw right where they were and directed the officers to the suspects and found them despite being buried under a bunch of brush and other materials. So I only say that to say this is very successful. Sergeant Welsh has done a great job with this. Officer Malone, too, should be mentioned. He's another founding member of this drone team, and now it's about 8 members strong, and you should feel very confident we have this ability should something happen in the city. And then a couple other things real quick, just success stories recently, again, on investments you guys have made. Our directed patrol unit, just at the end of September, Officer Evanichko, one of our newest canine handlers, made a traffic stop over off of Hunter Avenue. Long story short, he turned that stop into a search warrant, which found over 30 grams of methamphetamine, 20 grams of fentanyl, which could kill hundreds of these rooms here. I mean, a little bit of fentanyl can go a long way, and over 22 firearms. And what happened is, after that traffic stop, he wrote a warrant on the suspected house and then wrote 2 more warrants outside of our jurisdiction in other counties that rounded up 22 firearms, loaded firearms that were raring to go. So again, we don't have homicides every day around here. I understand that. We don't have shootings every day around here, although we have our fair amount. But I think a lot of that goes to a lot of the hard work and dedication these men and women are doing. Just recently, too, Sergeant Sims let me know about one of our newer officers, Officer Halfley, made a traffic stop, brought a canine out. We didn't have a canine working at that particular time, but our officers are so excited to have this ability that he came out while he was training. He wasn't even working. He wasn't even in uniform. So he came out in training and ran the track, and we got 2 loaded firearms out of that traffic stop. 1 or 2. 2 loaded firearms out of that traffic stop and some methamphetamine. So these individuals are killing it. Very proud of them. Everywhere from our newer officers to some of our most experienced supervisors are really doing a lot of good things. I'm proud of them. So that's all.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you.
I wanted to follow up on my October 15th email about the lead service lines. So Jason Leskowski worked extremely hard to get the inventory pulled together, and we have discovered no lead service lines. We have no reason to believe we have any lead service lines, so I don't want anybody getting excited about that. We did find just under 5,900 service lines that are either galvanized requiring replacement or unknown. Utilities is continuing to do inventories and surveys in homes as they're going out and reading meters to bring those unknown numbers down. And so we think will be just about 5,000 service lines that will fall into galvanized requiring replacement. So the survey has been submitted. We are in compliance. The funny thing was the day that I finished the lead service line plan and signed it, and we were pulling the inventory together, the Biden-Harris administration announced that they had finalized the lead copper rule improvement. This is the one that we had talked about in the spring, where we now have a 10-year period where we have to replace all of those lines. Our sampling changes, we have to start providing filter pictures, a whole lot of requirements that we're still trying to figure out. I had one of our consultants send us the pre-publication rule. It's about 800 pages long, so I'm still working through that. So in the meantime, as we work through this, we are now required to send letters to those 5,900 customers that are either unknown or galvanized requiring replacement, to tell them that they are unknown or galvanized requiring replacement. Those letters have to go out by the middle of November, and Utilities Collection has started sending those out. So if you hear from your constituents. The other thing, yeah, that's it. We're continuing to whittle our numbers down, and we are sending those numbers out, those letters out. So if you get calls, Jason Leskowski is your best contact. He's the one that's tracking the stuff for the Division of Water. If someone wants us to come and check their line, he would be the one to contact, and we will be happy to come out and make sure that you have a good line coming into the house.
Mr. Chair, just one quick question. Denise, could you send us contact information for that gentleman?
Yes.
On council, just so we can easily connect folks with.
And it's on the letter, so.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
So, good news, bad news. The lead line replacement will start in 2027, and we have 10 years to do that, so.
So, any other questions? What is the average cost per line to replace?
So the estimate.
No, we might have 5,000, we might have 1,000.
So there's 2 parts to the line, as I explained before. There's the public line, which goes from the water line to the curb box, and then there's the private line. So we don't think that on the public side, we have many lines to replace. The Division of Water was very aggressive when the lead copper rules first came out in the 1990s and got in and started replacing these things. So the question now comes from the curb box to the house, which is a private line, and how that comes about and the impacts to the city and how best to handle all of this. So Stephanie's looked at it, and there's a lot of legal issues involved in this that we have to work out. And depending on how we choose to fund this, whether we as the city pay for the private line replacement or whether we get some kind of funding to do that. I will say that there is money available through community development for low and moderate income. So if people are concerned about that, they should get a hold of community development, and that is in the letter also. So your question, we're estimating 10 to 14,000 if we have to replace from the street to the meter.
And you're saying that that will not be borne by the resident, but hopefully?
Not determined.
We don't have a funding source yet. So for the number of homes that we think we have to replace, we're talking about $70 million if the city has to fund it. The new water plant is $95 million. So, we could build a new water plant for that. So we will keep you informed as we work through this. US EPA hasn't even worked through it. They're going to be holding a webinar in the next couple of weeks to try and explain this. We keep getting conflicting answers from Ohio EPA, so we don't know what we're doing.
So we absolutely have to send a letter out in the middle of November telling people, basically rolling up a red flag saying we've got an issue, but we don't even know how we're going to resolve the issue at this point. So when people start calling, which they will, which they already have, about the inspections, what are we supposed to tell them? I don't understand what's going. We're going to send a letter to our constituents telling them that there might be lead, and that you might have to pay for it, but you might not have to pay for it.
We are mandated to use a form from Ohio EPA that says exactly what we have to send out. We're mandated to do it by November 15th. And it's just to notify them that they have either an unknown line or a galvanized in need of replacement.
Okay, I still don't understand what we are supposed to tell people when they call, because they will.
Councilman Ailes, if I could
Yes.
say, you can tell them that it's a federal regulation, that we don't have the ability to override the federal government, unfortunately. It stinks, but this is coming down from the very top, and there's nothing that Denise can do but try and comply, and that's what we're trying, our very best to do, even though it's rather difficult because, like she said, there's a whole lot of conflicting information. It's still not completely worked through. This is your federal government at work, folks. I'm sorry, but that's what it is, unfortunately.
And depending on who wins the election, it might just go away.
Yeah.
We don't know.
That was one of the things with the timing. There is a window on federal regulations that a new administration can void, but they got this in before that window. So the only thing a new administration could do is promulgate a new rule. And the reason I don't want to get too deep into this is I'm sure there'll be a slew of lawsuits over this. Because while we're talking about 5,900, the city of Cleveland is talking about $250,000. So we're just trying to stay in compliance.
I have
Thanks.
a question.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, you were jumping. I already asked a question, so you go and I'll go after you.
Good, it's my turn. Utilities are sending out letters. Are they just sending letters to the customers or to the actual owners of the property?
We are required to send the letter to the person that receives the bill.
Okay.
And the letter says, please share this.
Okay, so there's rentals in town, so people who own the rentals are not going to be aware, is what I'm getting at. Okay.
So as we get into this, there's
Yeah.
public education, and then we get into the who gets notified.
But you could call utilities and ask and
you're
get
on
that
the list.
information if
Yes.
all the paperwork.
Right.
Okay.
If somebody wanted to.
And I did not look. Jason will be posting it on the city website, so you could look up your property.
The 5,900 properties.
The whole inventory.
Got it.
Everybody, all
Lovely.
17,000.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know you mentioned, Denise, that there were CDBG grants that could help out lower income folks. At this time, and I'm assuming the answer is probably no, but are there any other mechanisms to help offset the costs either for the city or for the customer? is that being explored? I'm asking purely just for educational purposes here for me.
So what the Biden administration said through all of this is, we've made lots of money available. They are making it available as a loan, which means we still have to pay it back. And the criteria on it says if we take the US EPA loan money, we have to bear the whole cost. We can't do an assessment. We can't charge the homeowner for their share of the line. So those are issues that we're still trying to figure out.
And my last question, Mr. Chairman, on that loan, is there, I've read in the past how, the federal government issues loans and then sometimes maybe they cancel out the interest or something like that. Is there any kind of mechanism like that in place for the loan, or?
They do have, we don't qualify.
Son of a gun, all righty.
Remember, the price tag is $70 million.
No, I know. I'm just trying to wrap my mind around this and get creative with funding because, yeah. I mean, I share Larry's point. I want to see what we can do to, try and offset this on the customer's end. And at the same time, I know we got to keep our books whole too. So I'm just sitting over here thinking how to make this all work. So I appreciate your information, though. Thank you very much.
So the first thing, and Darren has committed to this, is by 2027, he wants to have all the unknowns identified. And then we'll have a better number to work with.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise, and appreciate the update. Is there any further updates with good news from anybody?
Transfer station open, we had the ribbon cutting on Friday, so the transfer station's done. Sean has received his health department permit, and he's just waiting for somebody at the EPA to sign off. He thinks he will have that this week.
Very good.
Did it come today?
Something came in today, but I'm not sure what it was.
Okay. So-
Great. Thank you. You have an update?
I have some updates. I'm going to be on the 11-4 council meeting, bringing in some annual legislation pieces, which everybody enjoys so much. The Edie Road TIF developer notes, the Edie Road Flagstar Island Capital Letter of Credit note, the annual courthouse note legislation that the clerk's going to have fun reading all that preamble. For all three of those, I'm going to ask for 2 readings, so they're passed by the end of November, because all these come due in December. And then I'm also going to be bringing in a piece of legislation to amend good news on the settlements for that we received to help reimburse police and fire's pensions. They sent us more revenue than they anticipated in the Schedule A, so I got to bring a piece of legislation to appropriate that difference, so then I can do a expense adjustment and get that cash and back to where it needs to be. So for that one, and then at the end of November's final meeting in November, we're working with Denise on true-upping the expense budget versus revenue, because with the water plant and paying off, we just kind of got to go through and look at what expenses are still out there, because I don't want to pull budget away and a bill needs to be paid still. So that'll come at the tail end, the last meeting in November.
Okay. Any questions of Auditor Nettles? Thank you. Tonight's meeting prep, Pro Tem President Schoonover.
All I have, we were going to have an update from the building department by Jeff Davis, but he is also sick today, so we're going to skip over that. So we'll speed up my process a little.
Yeah, very good.
That's all I got.
And any other items for finance to be brought up? I hear none, and I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
And
Regular meeting, we're going to start at 6:55.
okay, thank you.
Hi, this is Larry Wentz with Olivedale Senior Citizens of Fairfield County. Our mission is to provide an atmosphere for friendships and feeling of connection with others. To help achieve our mission, we rely on local support, which is why we're honored to once again be a recipient of Buckeye Cares program. This month, Buckeye Toyota and Buckeye Honda will make a donation with every vehicle sold. Thank you, Buckeye, for all your ongoing support.
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our two locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.
All right, I'm always late, and here we are getting started late, so take your positions. Well, half of you ready for a prepared prayer, and I don't have one, but I am going to give you a little bit of my reflection from some personal stuff this week, so just be nice to each other. Everything going around, whether it's on Facebook, TV, you don't know what the person next to you is going through. And we live in I still consider this a small town. You go to church with everyone you talk to, you see them at the restaurant, they're probably serving your food. So it's one of those things like they're your neighbors. So calm down, it's not that big a deal. And just be nice. That's my reflection for the day. Amen. Pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sorry I didn't call it to order before that, but we are now in session. Alrighty. Call and roll.
Mr. Ehlers? Here. Mr. Ailes? Here. Mr. Bizjak?
Here.
Mrs. Kreitz? Here. Mrs. Hoop? Mr. Luchtenberg?
Esther, here.
Ms. Teener? Here. Mr. Wing?
Here.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Here.
All 10 members are present. Can I get a motion to excuse President Porter this evening?
I'll make a motion.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Let's let the record reflect that President Porter is excused. Reading and disposal of the journal.
I have regular meetings minutes dated October 14th, 2024, and special meeting minutes dated October 21st, 2024.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to include the reading and disposal of the journal in the record.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to dispose of the journal. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Reports of city officials.
Email dated October 14, 2024, regarding Greenfield Township to Lancaster annexation, submitted by Law Director Hall. Email dated October 15, 2024, lead service line replacement plan, submitted by Denise Cruz, environmental engineer. Email dated October 15, 2024, regarding the lead service line inventory, submitted by the Division of Water Compliance Manager, Jason Laskowski. Email dated October 15, 2024, provided Excel version of the first draft of 2025, submitted by Service Safety Director Woody. Email dated October 21st, 2024, regarding a special safety committee meeting for budget review, submitted by Mr. Bizjak. Email dated October 24th, 2024, regarding real estate settlements received from Fairfield County, submitted by Auditor Nettles. Email dated October 25th, regarding code enforcement and zoning committee meeting agenda, submitted by Mr. Ehlers. And email dated October 25th, 2024, regarding 2025 draft budget as of 10/25/2024, submitted by Service Safety Director Woody.
Mr. President, I'd like to add the reports of city officials into the record.
Second.
A motion and a second to file the reports of city officials. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Do we have any communications?
Email dated October 16th, 2024, regarding an invitation to a tour of Reflections Independent and Assisted Living Facilities, submitted by the Resident Services Coordinator, Deb Clark. Series of emails dated October 21st, 2024, regarding a reminder notice of an exempt conveyance from the Lancaster Port Authority, submitted by Lori Kidder of Fairfield County. Email dated October 22nd, 2024, regarding an open letter to the city leadership on a boycott list submitted by owner of Bewilderment Brandon Love. Email dated October 28, 2024 regarding regulation cabaret performances in Lancaster, submitted by Robert Knisley.
Mr. President, I'd like to add the communications into the record.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the communications. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Special presentations.
There is none this evening. The building department was supposed to be here, but Mr. Davis is sick.
Okay. Do we have any petitions or memorials?
There are none.
All right, now we have this time set aside for voters or taxpayers to address council. Is anybody awake in the audience that wants to address council? You guys are awake, I'm just giving you a hard time. All right, so no, so we're good on that one. And moving on to reports of standing committees.
Finance Committee meeting minutes dated October 14, 2024, submitted by Mr. Wolfinger. Safety Committee minutes dated October 21st, 2024, submitted by Mr. Bizjack.
Oh, so sorry. Mr. President, I'd like to add the reports of standing committee into the minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the reports of standing committees. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Sound like motion carried to me. Reports of special committees.
There are none.
We don't have any public hearings, so we are going to move on to the reading of resolutions, beginning with the third reading, a temporary resolution 10124.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into contracts for mowing and trimming for the City of Cemeteries, submitted by Public Works, and Ms. Tiener and Mr. Leuchtenberg.
Ms. Tiener.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion the council pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 10124.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yep, just need our grass cut.
All right. Seeing none, we'll call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Leuchtenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Tiener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Did you say
Yes, I
yes?
said yes. You-
Yeah.
Do I vote on these?
Oh, kidding? Okay, Mr. Schoonover? Yep.
Yes. All right. Motion carries 10-0. Temporary resolution 10224.
A resolution to approve the City of Lancaster Cedar Hill Neighborhood Area Plan, brought in by Code Enforcement and Zoning, Mr. Ehlers and Mr. Leuchtenberg.
Mr. Ehlers.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 102-24.
Second.
We have a motion and second to pass temporary resolution 10224. Any discussion?
Yeah, just a quick reminder, this is just approving a plan for what to do with property along Cedar Hill in the future if those buildings become vacant of any sort. There's been a public hearing on it, and citizens have had several times to discuss it.
Any other questions? You can call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Leuchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Tiener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 10224 passes 10-0. Temporary resolution 10324.
A resolution to authorize the law director to negotiate and enter into contract with the City of Reynoldsburg for the prosecution of adult misdemeanor traffic and criminal offenses committed in the City of Reynoldsburg within Fairfield County, Ohio, and to accept payment. This is brought by Finance. Mr. Wolfinger, Mr. Ehlers.
Mr. Wolfinger.
Thank you. Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution number 103-24.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass temporary resolution 10324. Any discussion? You have any discussion?
We've got three pieces of legislation moving forward, are all related to each other. It's the annual renewal of the contracts with the county prosecutor, Pickerington, and Reynoldsburg with the law director of Lancaster.
Perfect. Any questions? We can call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Leuchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mrs. Wing, or Miss Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
I messed that up.
Temporary Resolution 10424 passes 10-0. Temporary Resolution, wait, I'm sorry, that was 10324?
Yes.
Temporary Resolution 10424.
A resolution to authorize the law director to negotiate and enter into a contract with the city of Pickerington for the prosecution of adult misdemeanor traffic and criminal offenses committed in the city of Pickerington within Fairfield County, Ohio, and to accept payment. Once again, Finance, Mr. Wolfinger, Mr. Ailes.
Mr. Wolfinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 104-24.
Second.
A motion is second to pass temporary resolution 10424. Any discussion?
No.
We can call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Leuchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 10424 passes 10-0. Temporary resolution 10524.
A resolution to authorize the law director to negotiate and enter into contract with the Fairfield County Board of Commissioners for the prosecution of adult misdemeanor traffic and criminal offenses committed in the villages and unincorporated areas within Fairfield County, Ohio, and to accept payment, once again brought by Finance, Mr. Wolfinger, and Ayers. Mr. Ayers.
Mr. Wolfinger.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution number 105-24.
Second.
A motion and a second to pass temporary resolution 10524. Any discussion?
No further.
You can call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Leuchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 10524 passes 10-0. And we have temporary resolution 10624 star.
A resolution to schedule Lancaster City Council meetings and Finance Committee meetings for 2025, brought with Law Director, or Committee, and Mrs. Kreitz and Mr. Wolfinger.
Mrs. Kreitz.
Yes, thank you. Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 106-24 star.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass resolution 10624. Any discussion?
Yes, this is just to schedule the council meetings for 2025
Anyone else?
and finance, sorry.
Seeing none, call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Leuchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 10624 star passes 10-0. Now moving on to second readings of resolutions, starting with temporary resolution 10824.
A resolution to appoint a business representative to the Board of Directors of Violent Township, City of Lancaster Joint Economic Development District, requested by Law Committee, Mrs. Kreitz and Mr. Bizjack.
Mrs. Kreitz.
A second of 3 readings.
Second of 3 readings on temporary resolution 10824. Temporary resolution 11024.
A resolution to make appropriations for planned 2025 budget expenses and other expenditures of the City of Lancaster for fiscal year 2025 and to establish line item transfer authority for all city departments. Finance Committee, Mr. Wolfinger, Mr. Ayers.
Mr. Wolfinger.
First of 3 readings.
First of 3 readings on temporary resolution 11024.
Is it second, Mr. President?
I'm sorry, second. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Did I misread it?
Nope, that was me.
No, he did.
Second.
Oh, you misread it.
Second.
Oh, I'm covering for you now? I didn't even realize it. That's okay, that's why we're nice, that's why we're nice to each other. Just cover and be nice. All right, temporary resolution 110, second reading of 11024. Temporary resolution 11124.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate of appropriations with the county auditor and the general fund 1001 for county auditor real estate settlement fees. Finance Committee, Mr. Wolfinger, Mr. Ehlers.
Mr. Wolfinger.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waives of second and third readings of temporary resolution 111-24.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the third reading of temporary resolution 11124. Any discussion? No.
It's just the annual piece that we need to bring the appropriations in line with the county auditor's settlements.
Any other discussion? Call the roll on the suspension, please.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Suspension of temporary resolution of the third reading passes 10-0. Mr. Wolfinger.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 111-24.
Second.
Motion and second to pass temporary resolution 11124. Discussion?
No further discussion.
And call the roll, please.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 11124 passes 10-0. Moving on to first readings of resolutions, starting with temporary resolution 11224.
A resolution to increase receipts appropriated from the unencumbered balance and amend a certificate of appropriations with the county auditor and the law enforcement block JAG Grant Police Fund 2027 and approve the then and now certificate for purchases. Brought from the Safety Committee and Mr. Bizjack and Ms. Teener.
Mr. Bizjack.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third readings for a resolution temporarily numbered 112-24.
Second.
A motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third readings of temporary resolution 11224. Discussion?
Not at this time, Mr. President.
Call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Suspension on temporary resolution 11224 passes 10-0. Mr. Bizjack.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 112-24.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the record temporary resolution 11224. Mr. Bizjack.
I have nothing further to add from the Finance Committee. Thank you, Mr. President.
Anyone else? Call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 11224 passes 10-0. Temporary resolution 11324.
A resolution to approve the issuance of a then and now certificate for the payment of invoices to American Structure Point out of the LDOT Improvement Funds 3014. This is with the Public Works Committee, Ms. Teener and Mr. Luchtenberg.
Ms. Teener.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 11324.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third readings of temporary resolution 11324. Any discussion?
No.
Seeing no discussion, please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes. Could you hear, I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice. You didn't hear it that time. Thank you.
Temporary resolution 11324 passes suspension. Ms. Teener.
Oh, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass and gross to enter upon the written record, temporary resolution 11324.
Second.
A motion and a second to pass temporary resolution 11324. Discussion?
Jeff had explained it earlier in the finance.
Any other questions? Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 11324 passes 10-0. Temporary resolution 11424.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to enter into an engineering agreement for various construction administration services for the solids handling replacement project. Water Pollution Committee, Mr. Wing and Ms. Teener.
Mr. Wing.
First of 3 readings, please.
First of 3 readings on temporary resolution 11424. Temporary resolution 11524.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to advertise for the bids for the solids handling facility replacement project. Once again, Water Pollution Committee, Mr. Wing and Mr. Ailes.
Mr. Wing.
First of 3 readings, please.
First of 3 readings on temporary resolution 11524. Temporary resolution 11624.
A resolution to appropriate funds in the Water Reserve Fund 6027 and authorize payment of bills for the Ohio Water Development Loan for the South Water Plant Booster Pump Project. Water Pollution Committee, Mr. Wing and Ms. Teener.
Mr. Wing.
This will be the first of 2 readings, please.
First of 2 readings on temporary resolution 11624. 11724.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract with the Fairfield Healthcare Professionals Incorporated to provide professional healthcare and wellness services to the City of Lancaster employees and their dependents and to declare an emergency. Administrative Committee, Mr. Luchtenberg and Mr. Bizjack.
Mr. Luchtenberg.
First of 3 readings.
First of 3 readings on temporary resolution 11724. 11824.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract with the Renaissance of Counseling and consultation to provide professional mental health counseling services to City of Lancaster employees and their dependents and to declare an emergency. Administrative Committee, Mr. Luchtenberg and Mr. Wolfinger.
Mr. Luchtenberg.
First of 3 readings.
First of 3 readings on temporary resolution 11824. Temporary resolution 11924.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to accept Northeast Public Energy Council 2024 Energized Community Grant Funds and to declare an emergency. Administrative Committee, Mr. Luchtenberg and Mr. Bizjack.
Mr. Luchtenberg.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the 2nd and 3rd readings of temporary resolution 119-24.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the 2nd and 3rd readings of temporary resolution 11924. Discussion?
None.
Any other discussion on the suspension? Call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kraft?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg? Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Suspension on temporary resolution 11924 passes 10-0. Mr. Luchtenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 11924.
We have a motion
Second.
and now a second to pass temporary resolution 11924. Any discussion?
Yeah, we talked about this during the Finance Committee meeting. It'll allow the city to move forward with replacement of outdated lighting in city buildings here in town.
Any other discussion? Call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop? Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 11924 passes 10-0. 12024.
A resolution to authorize the mayor to enter into a pre-annexation agreement with the Metro Development 2 LLC on behalf of 6 owners, including Fairfield County Auditor parcels numbers 01480989110, 01400995511, 014009952, 014009953, 014009954, 014009950, and 01400995541, consisting of 22.08 acres, or plus or minus acres in Greenfield Township, and to declare an emergency. This is with Economic Development, Mrs. Hoops and Mrs. Craig.
Could you repeat some of those numbers? I don't think I got them all. No? All right, Mrs. Hoop.
Yes, I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 120-24.
Second?
A motion and a second to suspend the rules, waive the second and third readings of temporary resolution 12024. Discussion.
Yeah, during Finance Committee, the law director explained that because of the expedited, petitions, we only have 20 days, so we need to suspend.
Great. Any other questions? Call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary resolution, suspension of the second and third readings for temporary resolution 12024 passes 10-0. Mrs. Hoop.
Yes, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 120-24.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass temporary resolution 12024. Any discussion?
This and the following, well, at least the next one, all have to do with annexing land by Election House Road for the apartment buildings.
Anyone else? Call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 12024 passes 10-0. 12124.
Do you want me to read all the numbers again?
Sure.
Okay.
6 times.
All right. A resolution to authorize the provision of services by the city to real property proposed for annexation, and which includes Fairfield County Auditor parcels numbers 01480989110, 01400995511, 014009952, 014009953, 014009954, 014009950, and 01400995541, consisting of 22.08 plus or minus acres in Greenfield Township, and to declare an emergency. Once again, Economic Development, Mrs. Hoop and Mr. Wing.
At least it's not 3 readings. Mrs. Hoop.
I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 12124.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third readings of temporary resolution 12124. Discussion?
No, this is the same reason as before.
Okay. Call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to suspend the second, third readings of temporary resolution 121 passes 10-0. Mrs. Hoop.
Yes, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 121-24.
Second.
Motion and a second to pass temporary resolution 12124. Discussion?
No.
Anyone else? No? Call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 12124 passes 10-0. 12224.
A resolution to increase receipts, appropriate from the unencumbered balance, and amend the certificate of other sources and appropriations with the county auditor in the income tax fund 2016. This is brought from Finance Committee. Mr. Wolfinger, Mr. Ailes.
Mr. Wolfinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waives the second and third readings of temporary resolution 122-24.
Second.
A motion and a second to suspend the rules, waiving the second and third readings of temporary resolution 12224. Discussion.
Yes, as we discussed in Finance Committee, the Income Tax Department has strong collections in 2024. Therefore, the department is asking to allow for an additional income tax split of $5 million. The same amount was split in 2023, and that's good news for the city. A lot of money's coming in.
Any questions on this piece of the disbursement of the funds? Seeing none, call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Suspension on temporary resolution 12224 passes 10-0. Mr. Wolfinger.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 122-24.
Second.
A motion and a second to pass temporary resolution 12224. Discussion.
No more.
Anyone else? Call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Excuse me. Temporary resolution 12224 passes 10-0. Temporary resolution 12324.
A resolution to increase receipts, appropriate from the unencumbered balance, and amend the certificate of other sources and appropriations with the county auditor in the .15 Fire Levy Fund 2046, .45 Police and Fire Levy Fund 2047, and .45 Police and Fire Levy Fund 2051. This is, again, Finance Committee. Mr. Wolfinger, Mr. Ayers.
Mr. Wolfinger.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council suspends its rules and waives the second and third reading of temporary resolution 123-24.
Second.
A motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third readings of temporary resolution 12324. Discussion.
I'll hold it.
Anyone else on the motion to suspend? Call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Suspension of the rules on temporary resolution 12324 passes 10-0. Mr. Wolfinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 123, excuse me, -24.
Second.
A motion and second to pass temporary resolution 12324. Discussion.
Yes, as we just passed temporary resolution 122-24 to have the $5 million income tax approved. This legislation is now to split the taxes on voted on resolutions that the taxpayers did a couple of years ago. You'll note that the split is not available for parks, as that we don't have the authority to appropriate their funds.
Any other questions, discussion, Ms. Teener?
Yes, I'd like somebody to clarify this. I'm seeing on the temporary resolution 12224 for the fire levy, $326,086.96, and it's also over here on the 123. Somebody want to explain that, why this is going into this over here? From the,
I'd
because the
be happy
fire, police isn't over here, it's the fire.
Yeah, the appropriations are going to the accounts as approved by the voters for police and fire. But while we're talking about this piece of legislation, I think it's important that I highlight a few things that I spoke with most of you about it, but I want to make sure everyone is clear. When we were doing payroll last Wednesday, we discovered some underfunded accounts in the fire department for the remainder of the year. So the 246, 247, and, or I'm sorry, 2046, 2047, and 2051 funds were underfunded. So we got together, the auditor, the safety director, finance chair, myself, the fire chief, his assistant, to try to determine how that happened. So the research shows us that on December 6th of last year, the budget would have fully covered all our expenses in the fire department. But on December 8th, we were presented a budget that did not cover the expenses. Essentially what appears to have happened, and again, this is recreating something that happened a year ago, and we're not exactly clear how it happened, but instead of having $12 million, $12.6 million in the fire budget for salaries and benefits, we had $11.2 million in the budget that we passed. Reminder, I was a finance chair at the time, and I did not notice this myself. Something happened between the 6th and the 8th that changed that budget. What I suspect happened is that we were moving money from the general fund to the fire-specific funds of 2046, 2047, 2051. The first step happened, we removed the money from the general fund. It doesn't appear the second step happened, and we did not put the money back into the other accounts and allocate from our unencumbered funds to appropriate that money for these expenses. I would equate it something to like, we have a savings account, we have the money over here, it wasn't brought over here and appropriated for the expenses that it needed to be appropriated for. Therefore, I'm asking that tonight we pass this legislation to allow this split to take place, which we already did that, but to allow the money to be placed in the appropriate funds so that we can pay our personnel for the remainder of the year. It is only a coincidence that the split happened today because that's an income tax that happens every year, income tax split that happens every year. We brought in more money on the income tax side, which is the good news, and now we're putting it into the voter-approved funds for expenses. So, yes, to be clear, we were underfunded in police salary, or I'm sorry, fire salary and benefits. On the police side, we were not underfunded, but we have an opportunity to allocate that money into those accounts. We can cover some overtime in the 2047 and 2051 accounts instead of using general fund money. So we're taking advantage of that opportunity. But any questions on that?
I'd be happy, let me offer,
Please
because
do.
you told me about this, thank you.
Absolutely.
Councilwoman Teener, you have an excellent question here. So Don had brought this, or the mayor had brought this up to me earlier today, and I got a chance to dig a little bit. And if I have to guess, here's what I believe happened, okay? At the end of 2023, thank you, you were gonna have large carryovers in the first 0.15 and then the first 0.45. And it looks to me like the administration, like we've done every year, tries to eat up, it tries to only leave the carryover, the amount of carryover in those funds to basically fund the first quarter of the following year because your tax payments will catch up. And so I'm sitting here and I was quickly doing math and, you know, during the afternoon, and then here Trish got me a couple more documents. So what I think happened is clearly what the mayor says, is they took it out of the general fund, which they should have, but they forgot to put it back into the voter-approved funds, which would have eaten away the carryover.
So I think this is nothing more than a clerical error.
Well, I just think this is something, and this is just me, because I can sleep tonight now. I just think that the public needs to know, even if something, we all make mistakes then, because from what I heard today, it was a totally different story. So now that we hear this, I think the public needs to know this is taxpayer dollars, and I don't think we should just go, okay, here, we're just going to shove this over here, but I think we really need to just be transparent, let the people know.
Absolutely.
So, sorry if I upset anybody, but I'll be able to sleep tonight. I don't know about y'all, but I will.
You're not wrong about that.
And I won't run any stop signs or anything like that.
But you're not wrong, and clearly, you can see what the intent was on 12/6. And this is a clerical error where it
Right, because if
occurred.
anybody would look at this one, if you're actually looking, because some people do, I know people don't think people pay attention, because the fire department's there, but the police department is not.
Right.
So that just kind of, okay.
Becky, I should be clear that Mr. Wolfinger was going to call on me to address this before your question, so we had full intentions to address this already.
Yeah, I thought we were going to address it actually in finance, and then I thought, well, I'm glad we're doing it.
It was running very long.
Mr. Wolfinger likes to keep a short meeting, so.
Well, I've been chastised for going past 7 o'clock.
All right, appreciate the explanation. Any other questions on that piece? No? So where are we? Calling the roll?
Yes.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 12324 passes 10-0. Do we have any other temporary resolutions to come before finance? Is it hot in here, or is it just me? It's hot. Is it warm? I thought it was because I was making fun of her, reading the numbers, but it's hot. Okay. We're going to move on to reading of ordinances. We don't have third reading of any ordinances, so moving on to second reading of temporary ordinance 3424.
An ordinance to authorize the amendment of the Joint Economic Development District contract between the City of Lancaster and Violet Township and to declare an emergency. Requested by Economic Development Committee, Mrs. Hoop and Mrs. Kreitz.
Mrs. Hoop?
Second and 3 readings.
Second of 3 readings on temporary ordinance 3424. Temporary ordinance 3524.
An ordinance to repeal Lancaster Codified Ordinance Part 1 Administrative Code 12, or Title 5 Administrative Chapter 139 Public Transit Board of the Codified Ordinance of the City of Lancaster, requested by Law Committee and Mrs. Kreitz and Mr. Wolfinger.
Mrs. Kreitz.
Second of 3 readings.
Second of 3 readings on temporary ordinance 3524. Temporary ordinance 3624.
An ordinance to repeal Lancaster Codified Ordinance Part 1 Administrative Code Title 5 Administrative Chapter 130 Service Safety Board of the Codified Ordinance of the City of Lancaster, requested by Law Committee, Mrs. Kreitz and Mr. Schoonover.
Mrs. Kreitz.
Second of 3 readings.
Second of 3 readings on temporary ordinance 3624. Temporary ordinance 3724.
An ordinance to accept the final plat for LDG Development's Emerald Place project and to declare an emergency, requested by Code Enforcement and Zoning Committee, Mr. Ehlers and Mr. Luchtenberg.
Mr. Ehlers.
The second of 3 readings.
Second of 3 readings on temporary ordinance 3724. Temporary ordinance 3824.
An ordinance to repeal and replace Lancaster Codified Ordinance Part 7 Business Regulation Code Chapter 751 Peddlers, requested by Law Committee, Mrs. Kreitz and Mr. Bizjack.
Mrs. Kreitz.
Second of 3 readings.
Second of 3 readings on temporary ordinance 3824. Temporary ordinance 3924.
An ordinance to repeal and replace Lancaster Codified Ordinance Part 9 Streets, Utilities, and Public Services Code Title 1 Streets and Sidewalks, Chapter 903 Sidewalks, requested by Law Committee, Mrs. Kreitz and Mr. Wolfinger.
Mrs. Kreitz.
Second of 3 readings.
second to three readings on temporary ordinance 3924. Moving on to first readings, temporary ordinance 4024.
I want to say thank you, Ms. Law Director, for not putting all those numbers in this one. In ordinance to accept the petition for the annexation of 22.08 plus or minus acres in the Greenfield Township to consent to annexation and to declare an emergency. This is with Economic Development Committee, Mrs. Hoop and Mrs. Kreitz.
Mrs. Hoop?
I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third readings of temporary ordinance 40-24.
Second?
A motion and a second to suspend the rules and suspend the rules and waive the second and third readings of temporary ordinance 4024. Discussion?
This is the same situation with the other two pieces. We only have 20 days to pass.
Sounds good. Any other questions? Call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Suspension on temporary ordinance 4024 passes 10-0. Mrs. Hoop?
I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 40-24.
Second?
A motion and a second to pass temporary ordinance 4024. Any discussion?
I don't think so.
Call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes. Mr.
Mr.
Ailes?
Ailes? Mr. Ailes. I quit today. Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 4024 passes 10-0. Temporary ordinance 4124.
An ordinance pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 709.023 C to provide a buffer for incompatible land use subject to passage of the annexation of 22.08 plus or minus acres in Greenfield Township and to declare an emergency. Brought to you by Economic Development, Mrs. Hoop and Mr. Wing.
Mrs. Hoop?
I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary ordinance 41-24.
Second.
A motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second, third readings of temporary ordinance 4124. Any discussion?
No.
None, seeing none, call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Suspension of the rules of temporary ordinance 4124 passes 10-0. Mrs. Hoop?
I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 41-24.
Second.
Motion and a second to pass temporary ordinance 4124. Any discussion?
No.
Seeing none, I ask to call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 4124 passes 10-0. I don't see any more legislation that we have to discuss, so praise someone for that, because it's super hot in here.
Yes.
I've said it twice. I don't see any tabled legislation. Anyone have any unfinished business you'd like to discuss? Thank you for that. Any new business? Thank you for that as well. And can I get the announcements of scheduled meetings, please?
The next regular sessions of council, November 4th at 6:30 PM in council chambers, November 25th at 6:30 PM in council chambers. Upcoming special meetings, Special Safety Committee meeting, October 30th at 6 PM, City Hall, 1897 Conference Room. Upcoming committee meetings for the next 30 days. Economic Development, October 31st at 7:30 a.m., City Hall, 1897 Conference Room. Law Committee, November 4th, 7:30 a.m., City Hall, 1897 Conference Room. And Finance Committee, November 4th, 6 p.m., Council Chambers.
I have on my agenda, is there still a code enforcement meeting on, is that Friday, Thursday? This Thursday? The 28th?
That was today.
That was today?
It was today.
Yeah.
It was this morning, yeah.
You missed it.
My apologies that I didn't make it. You're good. I'm like, what is today?
I was gonna say, it's-
I told you, be nice, there's stuff going on. 28th is today, fantastic. Again, Mrs. Hoop, I apologize, I didn't make it.
Well,
All right, reading of the bills.
I have 0. None.
No bills. Any reason for executive session? Seeing none, I would like to ask for a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Multiple seconds, and we are adjourned. Please remember to sign your legislation. Thank you.
With my presentation.